Well, hello class. It's Wednesday when I'm recording this, and I won't do a lot of announcements because tomorrow you're going to be in the respiratory system, and I don't know if many of you will watch this right away. So I'll send out an email tomorrow reminding you to do that test, and everything will be on there. For now, we're going to continue with the urinary system, and we should have the anatomy down by now, microscopic and macroscopic, and now we're going to get to the functioning, really. We're talking about pee, urine. And this, of course, is a way for us to get rid of our waste products from our blood, mostly, remember, nitrogenous substances. But also allows us to regulate our body fluids and all the electrolytes to keep our homeostasis. So this urine, when we collect it, you find out that it's going to have the things in it that your body wants to get rid of. And it's always going to be some water. So even if you're dying in the desert of thirst, you still have to waste some water getting rid of it in urine because things need to dissolve in it. So water is always going to be a part of it, and it can be a large part of it if you're overhydrated, or your body can be stingy with it if you're dehydrated because it wants to keep that nice homeostasis in your fluid levels, which we'll talk about in the next section, fluid levels. So urine is mostly water. And it's the result of these three processes. And of course, these sound very important, sound like a multiple choice question there. I mean, urine is formed mostly through that filtration. That's the bulk. You're going to see you make about like 48 gallons of fluid, filters out every day of your blood. And filtration simply means that you have pressure on one side and you have a filter that's semi-permeable, so some things get through and the big things don't get through. So that's why it's filtration. And the whole driver of this to make your urine is your blood pressure. Now, in chemistry, maybe you have some filter paper, it'd be gravity, pulling the fluid through that filter. But here it's going to be the blood pressure pushing against this filtration membrane, which you guys are well aware of. Remember the little podocytes with their feet, little holes in the capillaries and the basement membrane? That's the filter. And what's going to go through it is anything that's small enough to make it through the filter. And also, if it's not negatively charged, that helps too. The tubular reabsorption is going to be where you reabsorb, you're going to see 99% of the sodium, 99% of the water. It all has to be brought back into your body after it's been originally filtered. Talk about that. And then secretion is when your body can purposely push out chemicals that it doesn't want in your body. And they're tubular because this happens in these tubes, the whole tube system, the proximal, distal, the loop, that's where it's going on. Those cells are epithelial cells, mostly cuboidal, highly active, and they are working to create this urine, this waste product that has none of the good stuff being wasted, like sugar and vitamins, and has a high amount of whatever kind of drugs or electrolytes or excess water you want to get rid of. That's the basics. So, I taught you in the cardiovascular system about what's going on in these capillary beds. So above, simply review, the arterial ends, you're going to have the highest pressure, and that this pressure against a leaky capillary is going to cause fluid to leak out. Remember? All that fluid. And there is osmosis too that's going to pull that fluid back. But on the arterial end, the blood pressure is high enough that the net movement will be water out of it. And then you learned on the venous end that pressure is low because you've lost that blood pressure, but osmosis will suck back most of that water to go back to the veins, eventually to your heart. And then the excess water, remember, got carried away by your lymph system. All right, let's go ahead to the kidneys. Now in the kidneys, it's just unusual that it separates these two processes. So on the arterial end, that's where you have this glomerulus. And you can have even more pressure because you have a smaller exit. And so the pressure is even higher, even more water and dissolved substances comes out at that end because you've increased that pressure by clamping down on the exit there. And now instead of you normally go to a venule, arterial to venule. Now it's another arterial, right? You have the afferent, efferent. It goes to the second capillary bed. By this time, it's lost a lot of its pressure, and it's going to circle all the tubes as that peritubular capillaries. And some of them will make vasa recta, these long, straight vessels that are going to dive deep with those loops. And so at that point, in the tubes, is where you have the reabsorption. See that? It's separated in space by these two different areas. Yeah. And the blood is particularly suited for reabsorption here too, because there's lost a lot of pressure coming through, and it's going to be really high osmolarity because you've lost a lot of the fluid over here, lost a lot of the fluid. So by the time the blood comes here, it's more concentrated. So the water is going to just be sucked back by osmosis really easily in that proximal tube because the blood coming through is already pretty concentrated, more so than the fluid in the tube, and so the water want to be sucked back into your blood and thus into your body. All right. So if you had your pantry and you had to clean it out, it's like it's your cabin, no one's looked at it for a long time, you have two strategies. One of them would be to walk in there and just look at every item and then pull it out, look at the can. Oh, this is expired garbanzo beans. I hate these things. Throw those out. We'll keep the good stuff out in there. The other strategy would be, okay, I'm not going to fool around with that. I'm just going to take everything out of the pantry, and then I'm just going to put back the good stuff. Well, it's that second way is what you do in your kidneys. What happens is that the good and the bad is going to come out of the plasma, the good and the bad. Good being, sugars and amino acids and vitamins, things that you want, right? That's all going to come out too, along with the urea and the stuff you're trying to get rid of. And then your body in the tube system, that reabsorption is going to, take back the good. So it is, in fact, non-selective, and because what comes through is the good and the bad, like I said, as long as it's small enough, you can get through that filter. And it is going to mirror the plasma because, again, there's no selection here. You're not choosing what goes through the filtration. It's just anything, again, the good and bad that can fit through it. So the filtrate that comes out is going to be similar to the plasma, just the filtrate won't have the big proteins. And obviously the blood cells and such can't get through too. And it's going to blow your mind. Blows my mind all the time. I mean, you pee out, what, half a liter to 2 liters a day, something like that. But the amount of filtrate you make that comes out of your freaking blood is 180 liters. And just in case you can think of gallons, almost 50 gallons. So I imagine those big oil drums, or you put lobster bait in it, or bear bait if you're a hunter. Those big drums, that's the amount of fluid that every 24 hours comes out of your blood into these tubes. So clearly you're going to reabsorb almost all of it. You only let a little bit of water through. Yeah. And if you look even the amount of blood that goes through, yeah. And of the plasma that makes it to the glomerulus there, I guess about 20% of the fluid in the plasma is filtered through. Yeah. So you go through your plasma, you filter it, you clean it, your whole body plasma many times a day. So you can see how efficient this is. You make your blood go through these kidneys, and the kidneys have a chance to manipulate what's in the blood and then to filter out the bad stuff. Beautiful. Coming back, a review again. This is just a gorgeous view of some podocytes glommed onto that glomerular capillary. See those gorgeous little delicate slits, those filtration slits caused by those fingers of the podocytes. And the membrane total is about 2 square meters. To give you like the surface area. Remember the lung surface area, how big that was? Half a tennis court. Here is much smaller, but still wicked impressive. And then through these slits will come non-selectively the water, anything small enough to get through those slits to be filtered. So indeed, I think I've really kind of hit it again and again, this filtration membrane. So you know it's a fenestrated capillary. There's a basement membrane, and then you have the podocytes with their little fingers, and that's that filtration membrane. And what comes out because of blood pressure is going to be what we call the filtrate. We don't call it urine quite yet because it's got to be messed with and manipulated. Urine is when it finally comes out of the kidneys. And again, you can see this glomerulus, this ball of capillaries, and you know that the afferent arteriole is bigger than the efferent, thus jacking up the pressure in that glomerulus, so it pushes more fluid out. All right, interestingly here, my face is covering some of what we need to see, but I'll make up some numbers for you. No. Taking a look here at plasma is this first column. And then this is in the filtrate. And then the last column is what makes it into your urine. So take a look, just kind of look over some things. Like immediately sodium, you can see that it's non-selectively just filtered out into your filtrate. But then looking at the urine, you can see, I guess my body takes back some of the sodium. Yeah. And then look at potassium, oh my goodness, yeah, I can see the low levels. It comes out non-selectively, but I can see that I'm purposely getting rid of more potassium because I find more in my urine. So this is a real good way to see what do your kidney tubules, what do they value, and what are they trying to get rid of? Because you can look at the differences here. Going down, see anything more that's particularly interesting. I can see sulfates and phosphates. I can see that generally my body wants to get rid of those. All right, then down below, I don't know if you can see these numbers. You can see them on the PowerPoint, but take a look at this. This is actually good. It's going to be a reveal. It's going to be a reveal, right? You're going to see that, imagine you have glucose, you can see non-selectively, it just comes out in the filtrate. You're like, damn, I want that sugar, don't get rid of it. Guess how much is in your urine normally? 0. Your body, as long as you don't eat tons of sugar or have uncontrolled diabetes, takes back every morsel of glucose. Just takes it back, it reclaims it. It's got to use energy to do it, but it's worth it because, glucose is your calories. You need that. And the others, you can see that they, again, all these come out without any thought or any filtering in particular. They all just come out because it's the same concentration, so it's not selective. But on the other ends, the urea, uric acid, and creatinine are going to be high. The numbers are going to be way up there. So that's what your body is concentrating and getting rid of. Glucose, it's saying, damn, I'm going to keep you because that's survival. That's your energy. All right, so very useful here. And when you do a whole urine panel, blood panel, you can look and see if there's any of these numbers are out of whack. Something's going on with your metabolism. All right, so what is pushing this filter? Hydrostatic pressure. Talking about blood pressure here. And this is just like we learned in the capillaries elsewhere in your body. And what we see is the outward pressure pushing out is going to be this blood pressure, this hydrostatic pressure. The higher your blood pressure, the more your kidneys are going to filter. That's a basic rule. And if you have low blood pressure, they're going to filter less. And your body will try to adjust to blood pressure, but that's the bottom line, is that blood pressure is going to be correlated to what we call this glomerular filtration rate. So the amount of fluid coming out is going to be correlated to blood pressure. What other things are influencing how much is going to be filtered? So the hydrostatic pressure is going to push the fluid out. And there's a couple things that are going to suck the fluid back or keep it from being pushed out. And one is osmosis. You can see plasma colloid osmotic pressure. Pretty much the amount of dissolved substances in there will cause that water that just got pushed out to want to be sucked back up. So that's always going to be working against the filtration rate. And secondly will be the pressure in the capsule. So as fluid is being pushed out of this filtration membrane, if there's back pressure back here, that's going to slow it down. And this can occur if you have a kidney stone that's obstructing it, or men get enlarged prostates. and that urine can get backed all the way up to the kidney, and that back pressure will work against the blood pressure and slow your filtration rate. So this is key. You work in the medical field, you look in how kidneys work, GFR. GFR, glomerular filtration rate. It is going to be the amount of fluid that is being filtered out by your kidneys. Yes. So this formula is simply, again, is what I just told you. Pushing out is going to be that hydrostatic blood pressure. And opposing will be any kind of back pressure in the capsule and osmosis. Man, that's how much dissolved substances is how much that water wants to be sucked back. And that's going to slow down the amount you filter out. And, if you want to be alive, you want your kidneys to be functioning, it's got to be positive, this filtration pressure. And in cases where you're hypotensive, your blood pressure drops, you can be negative on this balance or zero. And then your kidneys are not filtering and you don't have much time to bring that blood pressure up or get on dialysis, something, because everything will build up, the bad stuff. And this is just a quick, just a visual, just you guys kind of dramatic, is that remember 180 liters per day on average comes out of these arteries as the filtrate, but all but a liter or two gets sucked back up into your body, into the blood, because you only pee out a couple of liters. So the big danger for people that go into shock, that have really low blood pressure, you want to look at your kidneys, because your kidneys need that minimum pressure to have a positive filtration rate. As your blood pressure drops, your glomerular filtration rate is going to drop. And if it's no longer positive, fluid's not coming out, you're not going to filter anything, right? So that's a real big danger. And with time, these tubules in your kidneys, if they don't get fluid rushing by them, they're going to starve of oxygen and of nutrients, and they will die irreversibly. So the big danger, why we need to keep our blood pressure up, is keep our kidneys flowing so that permanent damage doesn't occur. All right, now I'm going to just give you a couple, we're going to play with the numbers, play with this idea. I gave you the formula. Let's take a look. Now imagine this situation where you don't have enough proteins in your plasma. We talked earlier about starvation, especially protein starved, what happens, and the kids get distended bellies and they get edema because they don't have enough protein in their diet. Well, imagine you had a kidney, liver issue or other reasons that you don't have enough protein. How would that influence your GFR? You're still taking enough water, that's not a problem. What's going to happen is that you're going to decrease that osmosis, right? Because you have less of the albumin and proteins in your blood plasma. The fluid is going to leave and it's not going to be sucked back up. It's like, I'm out of here, There's not that much to suck me back up because of osmosis. And so GFR will increase. You'll have increased rates of filtration rate. And then, this is using the other variable, the capillary pressure, is that if you do have some kind of obstruction, what would that do to GFR? Well, the capillary pressure is pushing back. If you push back more, that's going to go against the water coming out. And so it's going to lower your GFR. So, good. Just kind of some examples. So, very, very simple. GFR is going to be your blood pressure minus osmosis and minus any capillary pressure working against it. Well, amazingly, we pee out just enough that we take in. We lose some water elsewhere, but pretty much that's pretty close to it. So I can't believe she drinks all this water, 6 gallons a day. So she must always be at the bathroom. But look, your kidneys can handle it, right? And on the other hand, if she were to be caught in the desert without water, well, immediately she'd pee out just the amount, but then very quickly you'd see she would stop peeing and the pee would become darker and darker and less and less and less. So your body has this amazing ability, well, I'll show you how they do it, how your body does it, to conserve water if it needs to, or kick it out if you have too much water. So your GFR, normally you use auto-regulate it. There's signals between your central nervous system and the kidneys and hormones that keeps your glomerular filtration rate pretty constant. But I'll show you how that if your blood pressure does get low, your body can work at the kidneys to try to correct that. You're going to see you can change the arterioles to increase the pressure to keep your rate high enough. I'll show you. And then I'll also get to right here, this renin. Renin is going to be an enzyme that's going to convert this angiotensinogen, this angiotensin system. It's a way our blood pressure is a powerful way we keep our blood pressure high. And if you remember that juxtaglomerular apparatus, I said secretes renin. When either your blood pressure dives or you don't have enough sodium in the tubes, both of them indicating low blood pressure. So renin is released by your kidneys when your blood pressure is too low, and I'll show you how it causes events that's going to bring your blood pressure back up. And then even your heart, both the atria and the ventricle have two different hormones that come off. And if the heart is overstretched, it will tell your kidneys, hey, we need to get rid of some water. So yeah, we talked about the endocrine system. We talked about, the biggies like your pancreas and thyroid and adrenals. But I said there's lots of hormones. Even your heart gives off some hormones. So if your heart is too overstretched, blood pressure is too high, you'll see how a signal is sent to open up the afferent arteriole in order to increase filtration rate to get rid of more water. So one way a patient with high blood pressure brings it down is through a diuretic, by peeing more. Get the fluid down. Your blood pressure is tied to fluids. Okay. So now I'll explain finally. We did a little bit. This was in the enzyme chapter, but this is the deal. This is angiotensin system. So your liver makes angiotensinogen. Remember, angio means blood vessels, tense, right? Yeah. And this is a protein that is just found in your blood, but it doesn't do anything. It's just waiting, And when that juxtaglomerular apparatus secretes renin, it's an enzyme that will cleave off part of it and convert it into angiotensin-1. Aha, we're on our way. Turns out that does nothing. But that has now been changed to angiotensin-1, and there are enzymes on your capillaries, particularly in the lungs, that will change that one more time to its active angiotensin-2. And angiotensin-2 does everything to bring your blood pressure up. So your kidneys will sound the alarm that the pressure's not low enough, it's not high enough. And as I told you, it's critical to the kidneys to have high enough blood pressure so things are moving. So the kidneys sound the alarm by releasing renin. The renin finds a protein that's already there, angiotensinogen, converts it to angiotensin-1, and then there's an enzyme, ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, that will convert it to the active form. And any of you out there that know about blood pressure medications, you've probably heard of an ACE inhibitor. And these drugs work to inhibit this enzyme. If you don't have this enzyme working, you only have angiotensin-1. It doesn't get converted, bam, it keeps your blood pressure down. So in cases where blood pressure is perennially too high, ACE inhibitors will prevent angiotensin-2 from forming, and I'll show you all the things that does. And if you stop those things, it will keep you from having too high a blood pressure. So I just gave you two ways that we influence high blood pressure. You can either pee more to lower your body fluids, or here, this one, these ACE inhibitors will stop this enzyme from making angiotensin-2, which is a powerful chemical that keeps your blood pressure up. Yeah, angiotensin-1 has no activity, so I was asked that question once. So how does it bring up your blood pressure? this angiotensin II? Well, one thing, it makes you thirsty. So increased fluid intake is going to increase your blood pressure. Right, sympathetic activity, also making your heartbeat faster or stronger. It's going to increase cardiac output. It's going to increase your blood pressure. Yeah. It works right at the tubes, especially through aldosterone. So aldosterone is a hormone that we learned came from the adrenal cortex that increases sodium absorption in the kidneys, especially that distal tube. And increasing sodium, when you increase salt intake, reuptake to your body, water follows it. So you're going to retain more water, increasing your blood pressure. So aldosterone, increase sodium uptake, increase blood pressure. And then ADH. Angiotensin II is going to work, guys remember? ADH and oxytocin were the two hormones from the posterior pituitary. Well, it's going to cause ADH to be released, and that will work on the kidneys to help retain water. And I'll talk about that quite a bit in a minute. Yeah, and then remember, ADH is also called vasopressin. It also directly is going to constrict blood vessels, which will increase your blood pressure. So damn, I just gave you like a whole laundry list of things how angiotensin II can affect keeping your blood pressure up. All right, beautiful. We're getting a view here. Coming back to this, you see the blood coming in to the capillary bed, leaving, and then it's going to be peritubular capillaries. The filtrate is going to go in that tube system from proximal down the loop to distal, and the distals all dump into a collecting duct, which will take the urine eventually to the outside. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Amazing cross section, through a pyramid, right through a pyramid, and look at that, tubes, parallel tubes. These are all these loops of Henle or nephron loops, as I like to call them. And then blood vessels that are following it. And you see some are big and some are little. And as a histologist, you can identify these, but we're not going to go there. You just need to know tons and tons of tubes. And I can almost visualize as I go deeper and deeper into the kidney, it's going to get saltier and saltier and saltier. This region around the tubes becomes saltier and saltier. Yeah, very, very cool. All right. Well, one thing I want to make sure I get this in. I don't know if I talk about it later or not, but one way you can affect glomerular filtration rate is by affecting the afferent and efferent arterioles. Imagine this efferent arteriole. It's already small. Imagine you clamp it down even smaller. That's going to increase the pressure behind it, right? In the glomerulus. It's going to increase GFR. Now, let's say you leave that alone. And you just, let's see if I can erase that. Oh yeah, beautiful. Let's say I just constrict the afferent. What's that going to do to GFR? That's going to decrease it. Less blood gets in, less pressure, it's going to decrease it. But in some cases, your body has overall low blood pressure and is trying to save itself. One way it can do it is to do it at the kidney level. And what you can do is if you clamp down both the afferent and the efferent, it's going to slow down GFR a little bit, but because you did both of them proportionally, GFR won't be that affected. You'll still have about the same pressure because sure, you clamp down the afferent, but you also clamp down the efferent. And so that's one way your body is going to say, I need high blood pressure for my brain, for my muscles, everything. And kidneys, you can, I can use you by contracting both of these. So beautiful thing. I'll make sure I get that in there, that your body controls the diameter of these arterioles leading to the glomerulus, and you can very easily fine tune the GFR by how much blood pressure is in the glomerulus. Well, this slide here is to show the overall how you create urine. And once that fluid comes out, remember, you got to take back almost all of the water, almost all of the sodium, all the glucose. And so it's done mostly through this tubular reabsorption. So it comes from the tube, from this filtrate, and it gets sucked back into the capillaries. And that means back to your body. And it goes back to your body. So you've taken it back. And then some of this is active. You see you actively pump things out. Yeah, it gets a little complex. And some is passive, like water, for instance. Write this down. Water is always passive. It always moves by osmosis. You never pump water. You use ATP or energy to do that. But many things you use energy. I guess what I'm kind of hemming and hawing, some of it is like secondarily you use ATP. So you may use ATP in these tubular cells in that sodium-potassium pump. And so you lower sodium levels inside the cell, and that's going to make sodium want to come into the cell from the tube. And as it comes in, you can kind of link it to bring in glucose in. So do you say to yourself, is it just going down the concentration gradient? It is, but you use energy earlier to make that concentration gradient, right? You pumped out all the sodium, so sodium wants to get in. And so when it gets in, you're like, oh, it's going in passively. Well, you actually used energy earlier. So for definition, anything that took energy to move a substance, we'll call it active. Passive is when it just moves down its concentration gradient. All right, a little aside there. So tubular reabsorption is where things get brought back into the body. And then you can also use the secretion to purposely push out things that you don't want in your body. And it goes into the urine, and you can get rid of it in waste. So, glucose, valuable. You are going to take it all back, all in the proximal tube actually. You take all that glucose back, all of it, as long as you don't have too much glucose. And that is the problem. You have too much, because there's only so many glucose pumps, all right? And if you have such sugary blood that every one of those pumps is working full time as the fluid goes down the tube, and it hasn't taken it all out by the end because you have so much, then you're going to have sugar in your pee, glucose in your urine, because some will get through. So I'm talking about in normal levels, and there's this threshold where once you have too much sugar, you've used all your glucose pumps, and some's going to get through. So pretty cool. But normally you have none because your body sees that as valuable. And your water, almost all of it gets reabsorbed, and sodium, bicarbonate, these things are important to your body, so it takes it back, even though it originally went out in the filtrate. Indeed. And then your body wants to get rid of things. And also hydrogen ions, we'll see. To control your pH, you're gonna be pushing out a lot of hydrogen ions in normal cases. And you should know, where does most of this take place? Right away. In that proximal convoluted tubule, 65–70% the water, the sodium, all the glucose gets brought back. So that proximal tube is really busy. And besides, it's the place where there's the greatest opportunity, because remember, the blood is just coming out of being all the water filtered out of it. Here's a good spot to suck back that water because you have a big gradient there. So proximal convoluted tube, the cells have microvilli, they have little fingers on them to increase surface area, and they are just really busy taking back what you tried to throw out back in the glomerulus. And this is what I was mentioning just a moment ago. You have that renal plasma threshold. That's when the point is you only have so many transporters on the tubes, and there's enough for normal functioning. But if you increase for some reason any particular substance in your urine, use glucose as an example, above a level where every transporter is being used, that material is going to leak out and you're going to find it in your urine. Yep. And we use glucose. It does take energy to pump it back. Yeah, and I won't get into the whole how it's transported exactly, but you should know that. Proteins. Now, most proteins don't make it through the filtration barrier because it's too small. But little ones, albumin, can push it through. And I think I mentioned earlier, even extreme exercise, the blood pressure is high, and some proteins can get in your urine, and hemoglobin too. But any proteins in your urine, your body wants them back. Those aren't waste. You can use those, and they're going to be uptaked by the tube cells, broken down to their amino acids, and any amino acids floating in the filtrate we brought up. There's different transporter for each one, and then they will be kicked back into the bloodstream. Now, the frothiness to urine. And I always wondered, I don't know if you guys did this walking in the woods, especially it's up in northern New York for me, you guys, Maine, New Hampshire, Mass, wherever you are. These woods you'll see in the little brooks, you'll see this foam, all this foam trapped in certain areas. And it turns out those are proteins. So proteins make this foam. And foamy urine is a sign of proteins in your urine. And we would have tested your urine, and many of you would have had traces of proteins. That's absolutely normal. But too many proteins, it'd be proteinuria. Hematuria is blood in your urine. Anything urea is blood. So those terms, you may read it, but you can figure it out usually. So proteinuria is when you have too many proteins in your urine. It causes it to be very frothy, and probably some damage to your membrane letting that many proteins through. But proteins, amino acids, all of those suck back into your blood because those are valuable. Water, always passive. Right? Often a test question, just realize it. What happens is you pump the salt, use energy for that. With salt, with the sodium, chloride will follow because it's negative. Bicarbonate too is negative, will follow it. And then water follows the salt. So move the salt, and osmosis, the water will go with it. All right. So looking at these numbers again, it's just amazing. Again, 180 liters are filtered out. That comes out of your plasma. And then you only pee out, let's say it's 1.8. That makes it easy. You pee out 1%, meaning 99% of the water is reclaimed by your body, so you don't waste it. Sodium, it's even more impressive. And what's going to influence this, we're going to see aldosterone. It's going to influence sodium levels, and thus water, because water follows sodium. And then ADH, antidiuretic, is going to work to help you retain water as well. I'll show you where that is. And then as a point here, just showing because just a small change in that, instead of 99.5, let's say it's 99.7 or something like that. Some small change is really going to make a big influence on the amount of water and electrolytes that you reabsorb or get rid of. So 99 to 97%, as this example shows, it's going to triple your excretion rate just by those 3%. So you can see how we can fine-tune our kidneys so that we have the right amount of sodium, bicarbonate, and water, everything that we want by just being able to fine-tune it. Tubular secretion is how we get rid of things, and that takes energy, and it's a way we push things out. Organic acids or nitrogenous substances again, hydrogen ions we're trying to get rid of, penicillin, some drugs, if you pharmacologically, the kidneys are going to want to break down and get rid of. It doesn't belong in your body normally, right? And so the book even mentions an example of an antibiotic where they put another chemical to try to keep it in your blood longer so you don't pee it out as quickly. So your kidney is going to try to get rid of substances, and tubular secretions, like I'm taking it from the tube and I'm actively pumping it into, I'm taking it from the bloodstream and I'm actively pumping it into the tube to join the urine so I can get rid of it. Sorry about that. So reabsorption brings it back into the blood, secretion from the blood into the tube. Yeah, and here looking well, your pee is usually slightly acidic, and the reactions in your body, if you look at them, a lot of them produce acidity. Besides carbon dioxide, you have acid components. And potassium is interesting. You saw in urine how it's actually in higher levels. Some of that is a sodium-potassium pump. You're going to be exchanging those two. And if you get rid of sodium too, you get out of the urine, you suck it back to your blood, it's going to make kind of a negative charge if you take a positive away. And that kind of actually helps the movement of potassium and hydrogen ions. So as we reabsorb sodium, we take it back into our body, it makes a slight negative charge, causing a net outward movement of these other positive ions. And here's some data from last year's class. We don't have this year's because You know why? And you can see I took the data, and this is neutral, of course. And you can see most people's pee urine is acidic, but it can be alkaline. More vegetarians than this direction. A lot of protein makes a lot of acids, brings you more on the acidic side of things. But your body can get rid of hydrogen ions when it needs to influence your alkalinity or acidity in your body. Remember, lungs are a real quick way to get rid of it, but then your body can pee out hydrogen ions, and it will raise your pH. All right, I think we're going to get to the point here where we talk about the nephron loop and how we actually make the urine. So we're almost there, but we got a little bit of complexity ahead here. All right. Indeed, we're going to get right to this, I think. All these things I will mention pretty quickly. And the next slide, we'll talk about this countercurrent mechanism. Very cool. And if you don't get it from my lecture, and there's even a video involved, you can YouTube this. There's lots of people out there that will explain it maybe in a slightly different way that will help if you don't get it right away. But a countercurrent mechanism is just when you're going to have a tube like this, and the currents are going opposite directions. This is used in nature quite a bit. See, imagine this is a duck. Where am I going with this, right? This is a duck's foot sitting on ice. You're like, wow, how does it not freeze the poor duck or a goose, you know? What happens is the blood vessels are going in opposite directions, and they're right next to each other. So you have this countercurrent heat exchange. In your houses, you may have a countercurrent heat exchanger. If you have geothermal or other ways that we do this. But the blood coming out of the duck's body is wicked hot, and the blood coming back is going to be cooled because it went down to this poor little naked foot on the ice, right? And heat is exchanged the whole way down. And so the blood, if you look at the temperature, is going to be hot, and medium, and cold down here. But the blood stays cold at the foot, and it stays warm at the body because it exchanges heat all the way down and all the way back up again. I don't want to belabor this too much, but the blood leaving the body is going to be hotter than returning it from this duck's foot. It's going to transfer the heat to that blood coming back up. And as you go down, that gradient is always going to be this exchange. All right. So this is going to come into importance in a moment. We'll talk about countercurrent exchanging and this multiplying idea too, where it's going to make it more and more salty as you go deeper and deeper down the medulla of the kidney. And what it does, and when you look at the kidney, here's a pyramid, it makes it super salty down here, just wicked salty, then medium. It's going to make this gradient of saltiness. You're saying to yourself, Parmalee, why do we need a gradient of saltiness in the pyramid of our kidney? Well, I'll give you the answer. The answer is you're going to have collecting ducts going through making your pee, right? Now that collecting duct, we can shut it off so it's completely impermeable to water. No water can get out. And if we have watery fluid come down that tube, we can make it go all the way and pee it out. We can pee out water like crazy. But if you're dehydrated, that antidiuretic hormone, ADH, will open up pores all the way along this tube. These pores will open to water, called aquaporins. And as that watery fluid goes down the tube, if it's wicked salty out here, that water is going to be sucked out by osmosis. And we end up making, really dark urine. Not that dark, hopefully. Really dark urine because we have sucked the water out. So this countercurrent mechanism is going to set up this saltiness gradient. It's the whole purpose of the loop is to make a salty, salty gradient so that the urine coming down the collecting ducts, you can either allow the water to leave your body or you can reclaim that water. And it has to be salty out there for the water to want to move. And it's a multiplier, we'll see, because as you come down, you're gonna, it's just gonna get more and more and more and more salty. I'll show you that. And then the vasa recta, the purpose of that is not to multiply, but it's gonna be called a countercurrent exchanger. The blood vessel going through is just going to temporarily store the salt, so that the purpose of the blood vessel is so you don't wash away that gradient. It just exchanges it and keeps it, because the blood vessels are also parallel and the tubes are parallel, right next to each other. All right, kind of an introduction. Maybe it doesn't make much sense without seeing a picture, but here we go. Here it is. I guess what I will do is I will give you the basics here, and then there's an animation. I figured out how to make it just play in the next slide, so we'll look at that. So let's talk. In your plasma, the concentration of stuff, the osmolarity, is 300 milliosmoles about. That's what it is. So the fluid coming into the tube is going to be about that also by the time it gets to this loop here. All right, you got that? Look at this. The very tip of the loop, it's freaking 1,200 milliosmoles down at the very tip of that pyramid. That's 4 times concentrated. And that would kill you if that was like in your whole body. But we keep it there, and look what happens as we follow it up. The osmolarity goes the opposite way. It starts getting more and more dilute. So look at the end. The end of the tube, it's 100, 200. Anyway, it's less. It's very watery. It comes in kind of normal, 300. Then it gets super concentrated with salts. And then by the time it comes out, it's really watery. And the point is, you have to have it very watery at this point, so it gives you the ability to pee out water if you want to. Now, if you're dehydrated, you can suck that water back. But by starting at this really dilute filtrate, it allows you to, in fact, get rid of very dilute filtrate. You can't start with normal and try to dilute it, because it's not going to work. This is the way it works. So look at this beautiful gradient. It goes from 300 to 600 to 900, way down to 1,200, and then opposite. Well, how do we make this thing? A couple things you have to memorize is that this descending limb coming down is permeable to water. Water comes out like it's nothing, like it's just going across it, no problem. The ascending limb, on the other hand, impermeable to water. No water can get through. And on the way up, in this ascending limb, you have these pumps that are pumping out salt. Technically, sodium, a couple chlorides, and a little bit of potassium. But whatever, you're pumping out salt as you go up. So what happens, and this can be done step by step, is that as this water is coming down, it's reacting out here because salt was pumped out. It's been moved apart, but it's right next to each other. As there's tons of salt out here, the water is going to leave. And then this fluid becomes saltier, and it's going to make its way around, and you're going to keep pumping out salt. And it can pump out at a certain concentration difference. It always is pumping. These pumps are working in the ascending limb, pumping out the salt. And then the water would love to fall, but it can't. The water's stuck in there because the tube doesn't let water through. And so each time it goes through, if you did this, this way, it's going to multiply. It's going to get, the first time it's going to be 300, and then it's going to, it's going to come around. It's going to always get concentrated as you get down to the bottom. And on the way up, because you're pumping out the salt, it's going to become less concentrated because you're getting rid of the salt. On the way down, you're getting rid of the water. And this is a multiplier that makes it wicked salty down below. And the spaces around, the tissue around, are going to be just exactly as salty as the tubes within. You can see it's going to be, it's either going to equilibrate. The water is going to leave until it's about the same. What's the purpose of the vasa recta? If you look at the blood vessels, they in fact, I told you that 300 was about normal. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to go down and get like deadly concentrated. But on the way up, it's going to take that water and it's going to leave normal. So the blood comes in and leaves normal. What's the blood doing? It's exchanging. It's taking the salt for a minute, and then it's taking the water out of the way too. So it simply is going to adjust things, and it's not going to be changed as it goes through. Whew, this whole thing is done. The whole sole purpose is to make this gradient from saltier and saltier and saltier, so that when we have collecting ducts coming through it, it gives us the ability to either let the pee flow or take back the water. All right, I think we're going to have a little video. Nice, these Australian accents. Let's take a look. Oh, it's right after this. Next slide. And those of you that look at the PowerPoint, you can look at that. You'll be able to click on this. And there's another link down below. I found it to be a helpful YouTube video on that. But this is the deal here. You can see on this case, when ADH is low, this tube is impermeable. The collecting duct is impermeable, and the watery pee just flows. And when your body senses that it's dehydrated, it's going to release ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and it's going to open up these aquaporins, collecting duct, and a little distal tube too. And it's going to allow the water to be sucked back up into the blood because it's so freaking salty as you go down that the water wants to leave. The only way it can leave is if the doors are open. And the doors are open if ADH makes the doors open. So you guys, you drink tons and tons of water, beer, whatever. Beer's a bad example. Beer inhibits ADH. It's going to make you, well, it's going to make you pee more. So anyway, that's a bad example. Tons of water, tons of coffee. Your body wants to get rid of the water. You're going to have low ADH levels, and the water is going to flow. If you guys are dehydrated, your body feels like it needs more water. ADH levels will be high. The kidneys will react by opening the aquapores. And because you set up this concentration gradient, the water will get out of there. All right, here we go. Well, I think that played. We will see, but very useful. Animation like that. Hopefully you guys watched that and a couple more things clicked in your head. But basically, when you become thirsty, that is recognized. Cells in your hypothalamus will start shrinking like raisins because of osmosis, water be sucked up. And ADH will be released from your posterior pituitary into your bloodstream or reach your kidneys. And on that collecting ducts, a little bit in the distal tube, aquaporins will form. And because you set up a salty gradient, the water as it comes down, the filtrate is very watery, the water will leave, get sucked up in the blood, and you'll retain that water and you won't waste it in your urine. Lots of ADH, you have dark concentrated urine. Little ADH, you'll have very watery, copious amounts of urine. Here's a helpful chart. You can take a look at that, see what all the different parts of your tubes do. And again, there's a much more detail. I just skimmed the surface of kidney physiology. There's so much more about how the individual things are transported and where they occur, different parts of the loops. But I think we're at a good level, what I gave you for an introductory type course. All right, we're going to talk a little more about urine. I have one more much shorter lecture. This is the longest by far, but we'll see how we can look at urine, test it, and learn a lot about your health. All right, thanks for watching.